You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My guest today is Andreas Welsch, and I'm your host, Lasse Rindom. Hi, Andreas, and welcome to The Only Constant. I'm really
Hey,
happy to have you here. It's brilliant to have you on this show. And you are one of the most exciting AI influencers on the market right now, especially on LinkedIn, where I work a lot.
thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
You are also, I think, the first non-native English speaker on the show. So from Germany, right, Andreas?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
And I think we've had Sri Srinivasan in episode 3, but he went to elementary school in Manhattan, so I think he counts as a native English speaker to some extent.
Yeah,
So we could do this in German. I'm from Denmark, so I know some German
yeah.
as well, but I think that we would probably lose some people, and I don't speak that much German tech lingo anyway, so let's not do that.
Exactly. No worries at all. Let's stick to English.
Cool. But Andreas, you're a leading AI practitioner. You've been that for years in a global software company, SAP. Uh, did the GPT-3 release in November 2022 catch you off guard as much as it did to everyone else?
Look, I think we're using AI for a long time already. Before GPT-3 came out and before ChatGPT came out at the end of 22, we've used things like BERT and other smaller large language models in the software that we provide. I think things like ChatGPT definitely put that on a different scale, and just seeing the adoption over such a short period of time skyrocket, and it being one of the fastest growing applications in the history of technology is super exciting to see. So for us, it was more about how can we make sure that we capitalize on that and use the technology in the right context, in the right applications. So we bring it to the business users that use our software every day.
Hmm. So, but what was novel about the moment, and what seemed to be business as usual for you personally?
So I think what was really novel was the ability of these large language models to create text, to summarize text, to generate code, and seeing all of that come together, and also explore this together with our customers on what are the most promising use cases, what are the scenarios where they need help, where we can help them using things like generative AI. So really, also thinking about it from that perspective, right? In business, it's a lot about information, communicating information. How much do we communicate on a daily basis, not just through email and chat, but overall, right? In the form of documents, your invoices, your bills of lading, all of these things, contracts, you name it. So everything that we communicate is still in a written form. So there's obviously a huge potential to use generative AI, large language models to process that information, to summarize it, to condense it, and then also when you look at things like software development, there's a huge potential to help developers, even our own developers, become more efficient and more effective. And I think that's really novel in that sense that we haven't seen before.
So you're using it that way already, Andreas, to speed up development on your own side in SAP. That's just a
Yeah.
curiosity question here.
Yeah, so we've actually partnered with Microsoft, and we're running a limited pilot of GitHub Copilot X to also
Hmm.
explore in our own company, how does it change the role of software development? How does it change the work of software development? And what can we actually achieve when we pair up a person with an AI?
Oh, that's interesting. So that means that SAP will be developing much faster features in the future.
Right? That's the intent, right?
Yes. No, but that means that some of the things you're saying is what most people would say caught them off guard as well. That generate language, analyze language, synthesize language. But you've worked in this space for, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 years, Andreas. But you were still caught off guard the same way as everyone else was in November 22, or is that what you're saying?
So I think for me personally, seeing this little chatbot thing, ChatGPT, skyrocket and explode to what it has been and what it is, personally, that's caught me off guard. I think as a company, like I said,
Yeah.
we've worked on AI, different parts of AI, different language models before. So there was more of a natural evolution to look at these kinds of models as well.
Yeah. So the explosion caught everyone off guard. I think
Yeah,
the
yeah,
attention, suddenly everyone was speaking about it. Suddenly you have to answer it at dinner parties and with your parents and everywhere. You had to speak about AI, and usually people didn't want to talk about it. Suddenly everyone wants to talk about it. That was definitely an explosion, and also something that I felt it scared me personally a little bit, because suddenly everything was an AI animal that I didn't understand, I hadn't seen before, and I tended to think that I was on top of hype tech, right?
right. And look, on a personal level, I think it's super exciting because if somebody comes up to you and asks you, "What do you do for a living?" all of a sudden they have something that they can relate to. If you tell them, I
Yeah.
work in AI or I work on AI, well, what does it mean, right? Before, people might have thought that's robots and Skynet and scary stuff and far, far away from me. Now you can pull out your phone and you can say, look, let me show you what this can do for you. So I
Mm.
think just the impact and how powerful it is, and also how it's democratizing access to AI is super exciting.
But there are some things I'd like to discuss with you as well, because some of the things that we've seen as the technology's been around for years. Google invented the transformer and have had BART and everything. They've been working with these technologies for a while at Google, but they didn't publish it. I think they didn't put it publicly. I mean, into their search engine. And now I just read a study today that said that Bing is hallucinating a lot on political questions. So when you're asking it political, what does this candidate mean about this and that, it's hallucinating and lying, telling untruths, and that's sort of, I think, the reason Google didn't put it in Google Chat, now Google Search, initially. But now Bing has done it, and these issues were there a year ago, and it doesn't really seem like it's gone away. uh, what do you think about that? We're still seeing the same issues, right? The hallucination issue, the context issue, the lack of world model. That's gonna stay, isn't it, in these models?
So from what I understand and what I've read, that's a key issue or a key constraint of large language models, right? If the goal is to predict the next word in a sentence and do that really, really well based on the training data on the corpus that the models have been trained on, if that's the next logical word and most probable word to predict, then it's going to do that. There's no fact checking. There's no consistency check in place to do that. They were not built to do that. So I think architecturally, right, it's a huge accomplishment to have something like a large language model, but it comes with certain risks and certain downsides. To your point, hallucination, factual inaccuracies, bias that's
Mm.
built into it just inherently because it's learned it from the training data. So I think if you look at software development, if you look at commercial applications, um, that just creates new challenges and different challenges, right? We've all seen those little disclaimers below the text field where you enter your prompt. This thing might occasionally create something that's not aligned with our values. I mean, think about that in regular commercial software, right?
Yes.
Microsoft Excel might have some rounding errors in your spreadsheet, or some other software might inaccurately classify your leads, and whatever else, right? Maybe we're losing a zero at the end.
Beware that spell
Uh,
check in Word might be racial
Yeah,
sometimes.
right. So these things, right? They're completely new and on one side unheard of, and I think it would have been unacceptable to have disclaimers like that in previous software without generative AI. All of a sudden, that's totally fair and acceptable because it's hip, it's new, it's the cool thing, and it does allow us to do new things and things differently. But I think being aware of the constraints is really, really important.
But I
Um,
think we sort of, I think one of the most silent, what you could call, not silent revolution, that's wrong, but silent milestones last year was when ChatGPT removed the research preview note below the chat. So it was said this is a research preview. Suddenly it didn't say that anymore. It just
Yes.
removed it.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason they could come out the way they do was by saying that it was a research preview, and that's why they could do anything, get so much user feedback that they could retrain the models on that and get smarter. Microsoft couldn't do that, Google couldn't do that, but OpenAI could, and then Microsoft could sort of tap into that and use that and then put it into Bing. But is it is this is it ready to remove the research preview? What do you think? Are we, are we you're saying that, oh, now we can play around, everyone wants to do it, so it's okay to do it, but is it okay to do it? Is it
So
production ready? It's a good question. Would you put it in Excel if you
right.
if you had had 5 years
Yeah.
ago without the hype? Would you have put it in Excel,
Right.
Andreas?
Yes. Right. So I think it puts a lot more responsibility on the individual user, and I think there the question is, are we ready to do that?
Mm,
Not just because of the factual inaccuracies, because of the bias, but even the intent of people and what you want to use it for if you're a personal user, and you want to use things like ChatGPT. I think on the other side, um, again in commercial software and business software, right, there's so many opportunities where people are doing tasks manually still, right? You've
mm,
grown up in that space. So what used to be RPA and let's sprinkle a bit of
yeah.
AI on top now is at a minimum, and let's sprinkle a little bit of generative AI on top, or even embed generative AI in these applications. So I think there are a number of low hanging fruit use cases that are similar to your Chat GPT, right? We've all seen them generate your product descriptions, generate your emails, email drafts, and so on and so on. But again, I think it still puts the onus on the user to double check it, to fact check it, to make sure that it is something that they would have written in themselves, or that they are comfortable sending out. I also think that is very important, because it's not just keeping the human in the loop, it's having the human as the final decision maker, and I think that's a critical point, especially um, given the debate and concerns of, well, is AI going to take over the world? No, right? It's not. You're still in control, but it's there to help you do things better, faster, smarter, and
Yes.
again, that comes back to the value proposition in business for me.
Yeah, but that also, yeah, and also that comes back to your podcast as well, turning hype into outcome, right, Andreas?
Yeah.
What the Bus podcast. I love that podcast. Really great podcast, and I can recommend everyone to listen into it. Um, but that also leads me to a question: what is the real paradigm shift here? So a lot of people are thinking that this is something that will lead to this AGI, the autonomous agent. But I think that the paradigm shift, on the other hand, is that now we can work with something that's unstructured, but as a microservice in your
Mhm.
RPA or in your automation flow, and something where humans are in the loop, or where it's orchestrated by another technology. I think it's not at all ready to go autonomous, or even just the big thing where it's augmenting something that we're using. I think it's so flawed there as well. Um, so what is the real paradigm shift here? Is this on the road to AGI? Are we going to go autonomous now, or are we just going to go unstructured data? What do you think? What gets you? What do you believe in the most, Andreas?
So I think or since the existence of technology or even software, right, we've been looking to automate tasks,
Mm,
whether it was keeping your books, or doing um, you know d- managing your supply chain, managing your HR processes, and so on. Not just SAP, but generally as an industry. And there have been different technologies over the years, over the decades. Now we're at the point where there's generative AI that can shave off the next set of mundane tasks. I don't think they're ever
mm,
going to go away, but it's the next higher level of mundane, repetitive tasks that generative AI can help us take care of. Maybe not
mm.
eliminate completely, or we'll create new mundane tasks that are even higher level than that, right? If you have GPT generate your email draft, instead of writing, you're the one editing and reviewing. So doesn't
I like to
mean,
say
right?
usually it's marginally we're marginally improving on the things that are digital,
Yes.
but now we can actually work with things that are not structured and not necessarily digital already, because we can use these models for that. So that is a paradigm shift, isn't it?
Correct. So I think that the real paradigm shift actually comes next, and that is when we move towards more agentic AI, where you define, I want to get something done, and the software in the background um, finds out, determines what are the steps that it needs to do to help you accomplish that goal. Again, you're still in control, and I believe you have to be in control to make the final decision of, is
Mm.
this something that I want to move forward with, yes or no, or maybe give some input along the way. But for the software to become a lot more autonomous and determine what are the right pieces of information, where do I get them from, and so on, right? Um, I think we're seeing early glimpses of that with uh, OpenAI's GPTs that they've released at their Dev Day in October. We've seen even earlier signs of that with Baby AGI, Auto GPT at the beginning of last year, where people were putting together frameworks to create agent-like
Mm.
components that could write code, figure out what is the API I need to call, what's the right format, how do I format this in a JSON format and submit it, what do I do with the information that I get back, and so on. So I think that's really the next phase. I think
Mm.
it gets really, really exciting. Again, not fully autonomous, not artificial general intelligence, you're still in control, but again, you'll be able to delegate even more tasks or micro tasks to these components.
But it's funny that you mentioned the dev days, because I just thought about yesterday that since the dev days, I think that the hype has slowed off somewhat on LinkedIn, at least. There's less of it. It's not as loud as it used to be, and there's a lot more caution. I think the Gemini announcements and the Grok announcements same week, and everyone was like, meh. Next day they were like, yeah, no, it was all a lie, and who cares, right? It was a mixture of those
Yeah.
two, and I think and just go back to the dev days or half a year back. That was not the case. LinkedIn was just full of these 10 prompts you need to try, and see what you can do now, see what you can do now, see what you can do now. But now everyone's like, hey, what about copyright? It's
Mhm.
resurfacing majorly right now, especially with the lawsuit, right, from New York Times. And also, what about hallucination? This is still a really big problem. World models and how you can, jailbreak them. The, People are just coming up with the concerns and saying, and I think that's because, right, people want to put this in production. um,
Yeah,
but
hmm?
yeah,
and
no,
and
no, go.
and I think that's the exciting part, right? Because I feel over the last year, a little more than a year, we've really accelerated that hype cycle, and we've really shot up to the peak very, very quickly, to all that excitement. What you mentioned here, the 10 prompts you need to try. Look what it did
Mm,
in Runway to create a short video. Look what it did in Mid Journey 4, 5, 5, 2, 6, and so on. Um, Here are the best prompts, and now we're really at that point. I agree with you, where we are thinking as an industry, where people in these AI leadership roles are thinking, well, great, we've done the pilot, we've done the proof of concept. I get how this works. Maybe we set up our infrastructure, and now how do
mm,
we scale this? And that's, I think, is the next pivotal moment, because that's when the rubber meets the road. The ideas that you've
mm,
had, that you've piloted, the users that you've gotten excited. Now it's a matter of scaling that, getting that across different business lines, across different countries, companies, and all the complexities that we know from automation, that we know from machine learning. I'm pretty
mm,
sure we'll see them again in the next coming months. Plus, what you mentioned around copyright, hallucination, safe
yeah,
use of these tools, and so on, user enablement. So I'm
yeah,
actually pretty excited, because we have created that awareness. People know of ChatGPT, of the different tools. Now it's about how do you actually use them. And on the other side, again, speaking a bit about my SAP side here, at SAP, the approach we take is we embed generative AI in the business applications that our customers and their users use every day, right? So they don't need to build the models. They don't need to fine tune or
mm,
train things and adjust weights and look at the engine room. It's there. It works. It works from day one. It's super simple to use. And so we can support that adoption and that growth and deliver that value to them. And doesn't mean that if you want to go off and build something yourself, that we say no, you cannot do that. Actually, we've
no,
just released something that we call our generative AI hub on our platform, where you can build on top of that as well and connect to different large language models. So super exciting there as well if you want to build something custom. But generally, the approach we take is it has to work out of the box. It has to be simple.
So you built the same things that I'm always a little bit. I'm not going to say I'm flabbergasted or surprised, but I'm always a little bit underwhelmed when I see big IT service firms announcing now we've made a switchboard for generative AI models. Because hey, okay, I don't need a switchboard. I need a scaled use case, right? Already,
Yeah,
I need to see it work. I don't need something to orchestrate some things I don't have. It's like building a parking lot for when you don't know what a car is, right? To some extent. But we've had a lot of those, a lot of those orchestrators and switchboards, and they are built everywhere. And everyone's like, we've already now you can switch foundational model as often as you want. But
right.
hey, I don't even know how to use one yet. So do I need to switch one to get where I'm my
Yeah, yeah.
point here?
So that's a great point. And again, sharing a bit about what our journey has been like. Right, our development teams have been evaluating different models from different providers, and we've struck partnerships with a number of companies like IBM and Google, Microsoft, and Anthropic here, and so on. So depending
Anthropic is new,
on the
right?
use case, yes, that's right. Yeah, pretty recent. But depending on the use case, one model might be better suited to be used for that than another. So
Mm.
on that side, our own developers are looking for choice. So we've built this component for our developers to use and say, let's have one point that we develop against. But then if you want to use Llama, if you want to use Anthropic, if you want to use OpenAI, here's the choice. But you don't have to build all the tooling around it again yourself in your HR application if you're part of that business line, or in your travel and expense application if you're part of the other business line. So and then we see customers and partners approach us and say, well, I do want to do something with generative AI. Do I need to build everything ourselves? So the answer is no, you don't. Um, but again, striking that balance between it's built into the applications you use, plus if you need more, you can also build on top of
Let me just see if I heard that right,
that.
because
Yeah.
I think I like to say always that people should not build AI solutions in their best practice processes, because they're going to be covered by the big platform providers like SAP or
Mm.
Dynamics or whoever you have, right? And that's what you're also saying that you're doing. But are you then using these different foundational models internally on your side? Your developers are using the most appropriate ones for the most appropriate use cases, so that the end user, the end customer, will not does not have to consider, oh, is Anthropic better at evaluating HR contracts, or is that ChatGPT, or so you're doing that for people.
Absolutely right. Yeah. That's part of the value proposition that we see that we bring.
Oh, that's great. I
Yeah.
actually like that very much,
Yeah.
because that sort of underscores the way I'm talking about it
Right.
myself as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
So yeah, and the way I understand it. So I think that's a really, really great way to approach it. But I think, just rounding off the other things we spoke about before on all of the issues or the concerns people have with generative AI, right? So I typically say that German engineering is renowned for its attention to detail and to testing and compliance. I'm a big fan of it. I think at one of my earlier companies, I only bought German software. I don't know why I did that, but it worked. And what it promised me, it actually delivered all the time. So there's never a disconnect there. I
Right.
love that.
Yeah.
But is that this attention to detail, testing, and compliance, is that an advantage in the current AI craze, right? And I know you can't be completely honest maybe here, but just try to go close to it.
No, sure.
Like,
So I'm giving you my honest answer. I think um, to your point, there are two ways to think about it. One is go faster, move fast, and break things, and the other one
mm,
is let's make sure we are the adult in the room and do what's right. And I think the second part, especially when you look at business, when you look at mission critical business processes, whether
yes,
it's quote unquote simple things like making payroll. If you screw that up at the end of the month, you have a couple hundred, a couple thousand angry
yes,
employees that are not getting paid, that cannot pay their bills. If you mess up your production planning, your conveyor belts are standing still. You're not manufacturing. You're not building the cars or the other products that you're building. So you have to pay attention to these details. It has to be compliant. It has to adhere to the same safety standards, to the same quality standards and requirements, because otherwise you're risking the integrity of the entire ecosystem of the entire system itself, right? The
Mm.
second, it's like the metaphor of the chain and the weakest link, right? If generative AI is your weakest link that you insert into that chain, it's likely going to break at some point.
Yeah.
So if that link is as strong as the other ones, you get the idea, right? So that's I think why it's important to pay attention to responsible AI from the very beginning, not just as an afterthought. That's why it's important to
Yeah.
include security, data privacy from the very beginning, to be transparent about what do you do with the data, um, how do you use it, and so on. And that's why I'm actually very very confident and excited about the way that we are approaching it at SAP as well, because our customers are trusting us that we run their mission critical business processes, that there are no interruptions because of the technology that we introduce.
Yeah, I think SAP is one of the enterprise applications that has the highest degree of critical business process trust in the world, and having a system where you can't really test or you can't have it give the same output again and again must be a challenge, Andreas, isn't it? With
It's
generative AI.
interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because because we're breaking new ground in so many ways, and that doesn't mean that we're going slower than others, but
Hmm.
we're making sure that we're very deliberate in how we approach it.
So how is this gonna? I'm just curious again. How is this going to change SAP in the future? So what is the SAP pitch to enterprise leaders on generative AI? What do you tell them that's going to happen? Because everyone must be asking you all the time. And is this going to change the size? ERP implementations, that's going to get easier. Is it going to be heavier and more testing? Uh, you know, just all around. The full circle. How's that? What does SAP see?
Sure. So I would say, if I look at this as a journey and our own maturity over the last couple of years, what we've seen is we succeed together with our customers when we make it as easy and as seamless as possible for them to use AI. In a sense, the business users, for example, don't even need to know that there's AI, right? For
Mm.
us in the industry, as practitioners, as experts, we love to talk about the fact that AI can do all these things. If you're a business user, if your goal is to match these incoming payments to open invoices, you probably couldn't care less if it's AI or rules or RPA, or if you're doing it yourself. So the key is, how do we make it as simple and as easy as possible, so you don't need a year, 2, 3, 4 years worth of data to train a model. Right? How can we make it such that it works out of the box? I think large language models are a fantastic way to help us accomplish that, because we don't need to train them out of the box. But how do we also make sure that it's not just generic blah blah that this thing generates? So think about things like retrieval augmented generation, where you augment your prompt with specific data that's from your business process. That's a key point as well. Putting that together with a prompt, so you get better and more tailored output. One example where we're doing that is in the space of HR. So, for example, in November, in our fall release for our HR software called Success Factors, we've shipped a capability where you can generate job descriptions or interview questions for a role. Now,
Mm.
you or I can go into ChatGPT and say, generate a job description for an ABAP developer, 3 years of experience. It spits something out. It's okay. It's generic. It might do the job, but it's not specific to your company, to how you write job descriptions, to the skills that you are looking for. But that core information, that raw information, lives in your HR system, and might even live in your job descriptions that you've written, that you've posted before. So why not take that in as data, as information, and then augment your prompt and say, generate a job description for an ABAP developer, model it after this or that, and give it an example. All of that obviously would happen behind the scenes, so you don't need to enter that prompt, but for you, it's a click of a button, generate job description. So make it easy, make it seamless, but also make it tailored to your business. I think doing all of that, and again, emphasizing on the point, make it as easy and as seamless as possible for the user. That's the key value proposition. That's the big shift that I see, and how we can help as a company, as SAP, help make our customers successful.
And I also see you're doing it in a way where you are in control of the use cases, so you know exactly what you're doing. Creating a job description, you're not asking it to evaluate candidates yet, stuff
No,
like that. That's not what you're mentioning, at least.
correct. No.
Because that's some of the things I've spoken about with my people department here at Basico is people going to use AI to evaluate applicants, and will we keep on getting the magic? Sometimes you want to hire for magic, right? But will you just get bland hires all the time if you make AI selected? Are you looking at something like that as well, Andreas, to have it work in those areas as well, or?
So we've had skill matching in other parts of our portfolio for what we call contingent labor for a while. That means if you're looking for someone to join you on a project for 3 months, a UX developer that needs to have certain
Mm,
qualifications. But what we make sure of is that we extract the skills out of that resume, and we extract the skills out of the job description, and we just compare the skills. We don't
yeah.
check for anything else, right? It's
No.
it's it's stripped of any personal identifiable information. We don't look at that anyways. So very, very strict, and again, taking a deliberate approach to how we do that. By the way, I actually did a study as part of my PhD studies a couple of years ago in HR, and we interviewed a number of recruiters and said, well, with machine learning at the time becoming more prevalent in these systems, and people thinking about doing something like resume matching or CV matching. I have a resume, I have a job description. How closely are they related? How good of a fit are they? Would you use that? Would you trust it? And we found that the people in these recruiting roles actually said, well, sure, I would maybe consider the recommendation, but I would want to take a look at the resume myself. And also at the end of the day, it's the hiring manager's decision whether or not they would want to hire this particular candidate, because
Mm,
there's much more complex environment, right? It's not just the resume and the job description, but you have people, actual people, humans. You have a team of people. You need to assess, do you feel that they can work together well? Character traits. Again, I think it gets very subjective even without AI. So
mm.
that's a whole different discussion, the recruiting and hiring process. But um, what was fascinating to see was people said, yeah, I could see myself using AI, but not to the point where I let it make a decision. I still want to make that decision, and I think that hasn't changed, and I think that's for the right reasons. We want to be and need to be in control of things.
I really love everything you've said, because you haven't said yet any use case where you're not just synthesizing objective information, basically. So you're not coming up with something. Oh, now it's making a decision. Now it's generating something. Blah blah. You're being very strict and very concise in everything, and I really love that, because I think that's also something that people listening in should take note of, because that's how you should work with it. Being very, very clear. It's not about, just like with previous automation, you had to have, say, only this, and you need to work the same way. Only do this. You can't say anything but. Like,
Yeah,
it doesn't work like that, because then you'll end up with a lot of headaches. I think that's the key
yeah.
point here. But I'd like to also get your point about, what about financial processes, right? That's the big thing for an ERP. And reporting.
Mhm.
How are you looking at it in those areas?
So again, to my earlier point, information is predominantly conveyed through written language. So
Mm,
in a finance scenario, that could be in your shared service center. You have somebody, one of your customers that sends in a, a complaint, or who's disputing an invoice. Maybe it was sent prematurely. Maybe they were being overcharged by your company. So now you have somebody in a shared service center that typically needs to look at the email. What is it about? Who is it for? What's the issue? The case number? Is it really a short payment, or sorry, a premature invoice? And that takes a lot of time. But there you can use large language models, for example, to summarize the information, to synthesize, what is this email really about? Do we think that this is really about um, a premature invoice that has been sent. Okay, then if that is the case, how should I respond as an agent to this person? So again, maybe have a large language model generate a draft for me that I again review. Maybe I make some edits. I'm fine the way it is. Maybe I make it more assertive. Maybe I make it more accommodating in the language that I use. So right, adjusting that as needed. Or if I cannot solve it myself, then maybe I pass it on um, to the next level, maybe to my manager, maybe to a different department, and again do all of that then again in my ERP system. So that's the way where we're looking at it in one example. Um, I think what's really key and critical is finance information. Right, there's no margin for error. There's no room for error for maybe this generates something that doesn't align with our values. The
Mm,
example that we had earlier about Excel and rounding errors or something,
yeah.
right? That's just not acceptable. So there, the key is to look for opportunities where it's text heavy. If you're looking at things like large language models, where you can reduce the burden on employees, on shared service agents, and so on. Um, but make sure that you use your existing rules, your existing logic for the core finance part.
I always like to look at controlling, right? Because then taking from a contract directly to an invoice, and evaluating due dates and all, cash flow due date stuff. Because a lot of people, especially for indirect, have a lot of contracts on payment terms, but still get invoices with 8 days due, right? And then they end up paying it, and that's a cash flow issue in big corporations. Uh, are you looking at something like that as well?
So, not that I am personally aware of it at the moment,
No.
to be honest. But there's so many ideas. There's so many things that the teams are working on across SAP. Like I said, the one we're prioritizing at the moment is more around the shared service center part and how can we really help agents in that situation, take off some of the load, make faster decisions, better decisions, or hand it over again to an ERP led process. Doesn't mean that we're not going to look into something like you mentioned. Actually, in procurement, it's really exciting. One of the big tasks that we found where um, people are spending a lot of time is around category management. So setting up a new
Mm,
category of spend, and then doing your research. How should we set up that category? What's happening in the market and so on. So you can use
yeah.
large language models to help you on one hand, again, summarize and create that information, obviously, with external data that you bring in. Um, and that's one of the examples that we're pursuing in the procurement space, for example. On top of your classic things that we've improved over time with large language models, like extracting information your from your invoices and put that back into your system.
Yeah,
But
that's brilliant. That's exactly what I was thinking. And now I've spoken a lot and asked you a lot of questions about SAP and ERP, but it's also interesting, right?
yeah,
You're, as I said, you're one of the world's biggest enterprise software suites, and obviously it's super interesting to explore what are you doing, how are you thinking about it, what is your thinking about it, Andreas, in a leading role. But also, let's some of the questions I've had. Let's just come back to some of the more explorative, maybe philosophical questions. I've spoken to some of the other guests about this as well, right? That some people say that software might be going away over the next 10, 20 years, right? You're at a big software firm, right? But if software is just an interpretation of data or a communication of data, as you said yourself, do we need software in 15 years when we have AI to interpret everything?
I think we do need software because there has to be something in between, that is the glue, that is the control center of all the things um, that your AI will be able to do. Um, you know,
It's not just the data lakes and then an AI to interpret it, and you can ask questions too.
so my point would be, or my question would be, isn't AI software as well?
Yes, yes, but it's an unstructured interpreting engine, right? You know what I'm getting at, don't you? I think
It's
you don't
not,
understand.
right?
So and what I mean with software that way is, obviously a window, a structured window showing it in a specific way. So when I post this to one of my friends who works, he's a global lead for Microsoft ERP Dynamics at a distributor, and he said that people don't want to ask about something to a data set. They want to get it presented. Here are the cases you need to work on today. These 20 invoices are open. They don't want to ask, oh, what should I look for today, dear computer? Nothing. Everything's clear. Okay, great. Oh, you asked the wrong question. You,
Right. Yeah.
it's becoming the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy issue. Yeah, 42. Okay, great.
Right.
I'll go
Yes.
home now.
Yes. Look, I think that's the opportunity. Again, just my personal perspective. If you look at the evolution, I think now we're at the point where software can help us accomplish more than it has been helping us, or it has been helping us to accomplish 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago. And in a sense that trend will continue, right? We talked about agentic AI, which I think is a
Mm.
key step in that direction. So once you have components that can determine the next best action, the next best step by themselves, in my view, it's only logical to help them surface the information in whatever user interface or front end you use. It doesn't have to be a graphical one. It could be, again, voice, and we might have different feelings about that.
Yeah, because my
But
point is,
right,
like these, Star Wars images of smart computer software robots standing typing QWERTY keyboards, super advanced AI systems typing on a QWERTY keyboard to a super advanced AI system, and it just seems, yeah, silly,
right.
with a nice word.
So for me, I think it's more about how can you ensure that the technology, that the architecture underneath supports that. I think what you mentioned around surfacing information, presenting information to you
Mm.
instead of you having to ask or to look for it, even if asking for it and looking for it gets easier or becomes a matter of typing a prompt or typing a question, but for the system to tell you, hey, here are the key things you need to look at today. I think that's the key part. And then the question is, how would we actually make that happen? What are the pieces of the puzzle underneath that need to be in place? How do you connect that to the data? How do these pieces find the right data and make those connections independently? That's, I think, where
And all
where
the
things are
and
going.
all the challenges of false negatives, right? Oh, that's not something you need to look at, and you
Yes.
needed to look at it, especially for critical processes, right? I think, yeah, that's the main headache I have, at least, when going about it that way.
Yep.
So you wrote about the other day that you think people will need to start working on the old, not old, but the machine learning models that everyone worked on a couple of years ago, before generative AI sort of took over and everyone started just only working with foundational models. I even saw someone on LinkedIn say that people are AI experts for years have become unemployed suddenly because people are not building AI models like they used to do. And do is that going to catch on again, or is people going to be, this? Let's spend 500,000 US dollars to try something out. That's still a quite exclusive elite dish, I think. But is that coming back? And do you need to do that to get successful with AI? From an enterprise perspective or from a company's perspective, SMBs, can they work with AI? Can they only work with generative AI? Do, what's your take on this?
So I think again that depends on a number of different factors. One is um, the statistical methods, your predictive analytics,
Mm,
your machine learning type models and algorithms. They're still there. They're still needed because they're really really good at predicting your forecast, generating your forecast. What products do you need to have in what location at what point in time? Because what is the demand that you
mm,
expect that you will see at this location? Generative AI is not going to help you do that. We've all seen many examples of how poorly it does with actual math. Right, 1 plus 1 equals 2. Great. You tell it no, 1 plus 1 equals 3. You ask it again. what does it say? 1 + 1 = 3. So
Mm.
um, back to the point of hallucinations. So, but where I think this gets really, really powerful is if you combine the two. So you use your machine learning model to generate your demand forecast. What's the product need to have in what store at what point in time, and how much of it? And you combine that information, that numerical prediction, the result that you get, with a generative AI scenario, a large language model that puts that number into context, that writes an email for you, but plugs in that value, that generates a report for you and plugs in that value that's been created
Mm.
using machine learning. So that's what I believe is going to stay. And now this could take different forms over the next couple of months as pilots, as proofs of concept for large language models move into production, um, and as the market further matures, because people will see that generative AI is not the catch all for any use case, for anything, right? There are limitations. So then it comes back to, well, how do we get that data? How do we get that accurate forecast?
But
And there are methods in place, right?
I think you said something about this. Or maybe I remember it wrongly, but I think I remember you said half a year ago that suddenly the attention for both your What the Boss podcast and your whole role just exploded with generative AI, like it did with everything that was called AI. But before that, it was kind of more trim, to get the attention with these AI models and the machine learning models that you were building, big machine learning models that you had to build. So is do you think we'll end up at the same place where people will be like, oh, so I need to spend $500,000 to try and build this machine learning model on my data set, and maybe it won't produce the results I need? Because that's the thing, right? You'll test it out and then you'll see if it works and you can predict anything. And if you can't predict it, well, then you need to either invest more or ditch it, right? And that's just not as a sexy a pitch as saying, oh, here's and chatting chatbot from OpenAI. Is it the same AI discourse?
Yeah.
To
So
get my point, is it the same AI we're talking about? Is the same market?
it's the same market, but I think the bigger question, or the bigger point is around change management. Um, Whether you introduce generative AI, machine
Mm,
learning, or RPA, you name it, any change needs to be carefully managed in an organization, because you're changing the way people are working, changing the way
mm.
people have been working for not just a couple of years, but maybe a decade or two. So that's the part that I believe you need to pay even more attention to than what is the technology that we're using. From there, it's a matter of how can we get this innovation to these users in the most seamless and easiest way. You don't need to build a model from scratch. You don't need to do that every time you want to get AI into production. But if you have products, if you use products, if you use applications that have AI embedded, that's where I
Mm.
would look. It goes back to your point about, well, if I'm a small medium enterprise, can I even participate in this AI trend, in these benefits? I think you absolutely can, if you look for the right scenarios, if you look for the right features in the products that you're using anyways.
And
And
you modernize
right,
your products, right?
right, that too, yes. But probably it's easier to modernize your software suite that you're using, depending on the scope, than building a new machine learning model from scratch, either with outside help or hiring people on your own teams to do that, and building that muscle. So
But it's
first
a
of
double
all,
thing with the
right?
change, right? Because change is also something that we're now pushing, and we're teaching people how to use it and how to use it in the systems. But it's also something that our people are pushing on us because they just started using it,
Yes,
especially with
yes.
the generative AI. It's a change that's both being initiated and also being remediated at the same time, I always say.
I agree. And but I think the best model, and your custom model doesn't help you if your users are not going to use it. If they don't trust the data, if they don't trust
No.
the results that they're getting, it doesn't matter. Right? Then they will go off. They will trust their gut more, because that's what they've been doing for the last 10 or 20 years. So for me, it's change management first. Then where do we have AI in products that we're using? And then if there's anything on top that really differentiates our
Yes.
business, our process, where it's core, That's where I think it makes sense to look into and to invest. And there, if you've made that decision, it's then again, what is the right technology to do that? Again, I feel we haven't talked much about RPA in the industry over the last year because it's been overshadowed by generative
Yeah.
AI. But rules, RPA, machine learning, generative AI, you already have four capabilities, four technologies there at your disposal. It's a matter of choosing what is the right one for this particular problem that we want to solve.
Yeah, well, AI in so many of the discussions that we're having with clients right now is a northern star, right? And people look to it, but on the road there, they're gonna go across BI, a lot of BI that they think they need AI for, and a lot of RPA as well, or workflows. So just integrations, right? It's just simple. But that was the same with RPA. Sometimes it RPA, but then it ended up being something much more simple than that. But Andreas, there's a lot of things we could have kept on talking about here, and I really love this conversation. But I'd like to just move to the final question now. And then maybe we'll have to do a reprise in a year or something to see where you're at then. But um, and this is the question that I always ask every participant on the show. And now it's your turn. So, Andreas, what is the only constant?
To me, the only constant is people, because you have people interacting with the software, with products. You have people interacting with each other. You have people introducing software. And the only constant in any of what we do, to my point, is people. They're going to be there. They're here today. They'll be here tomorrow. It's just a matter of how can we enable them to do more and do it better and more efficiently than they have done it yesterday.
That's a really great answer. I used to say that impact means that you're impacting something. And I think that's kind of the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on The Only Constant, Andreas. This has been a real privilege to speak to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
You've listened to The Only Constant, a podcast sponsored by Basico.